there was a pretty solid piece over there at National Review. There's no appeasing transgender activists. And that's accurate. Just like in many ways, there's no actually appeasing the activists in general. If the objective is the call it the revolution, however you want to describe it, if that's the objective, if that's the purpose, if that's the goal, then the thing has to keep going. The anger has to keep moving. It's just the way it's got to be. There's actually no other way that it can be. Guys, Tony Katz today. That's the name of the show. Good to be with you. The phone number, 833-468-8669, 833-GOT-TONY. It's from Madeline Kearns. And it is a smart piece in that it's recognizing this incredible issue that the transgender activist not only doesn't want to stop, but the transgender activist, sorry for whoever may very well be insulted, wants to get violent and actually is getting violent. We're seeing this. We're seeing this everywhere. It was violent, by the way, when you said, well, if you use the wrong pronoun, you're guilty of a crime. If you use the wrong pronoun, you should go to jail. It's worse. It's worse than anything else you could possibly do. Well, none of that is true. Compelling speech is worse than anything else you can do. Telling somebody they have to say something, never mind that you shouldn't say something, you have to say something, that's immoral and obscene. That's disgusting. That's flat out horrific. And of course, because these things have been going down the road that they've been going on, no one should be surprised that you get to a unique part two conversation where you have people that are now choosing to identify as being handicapped. They're choosing to identify as somebody who has some issues so that A, they can get attention, and B, you're seeing this for opportunity. Why not? Why not? This brings us to the importance of what is HR 734, which is the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, an act that people like Megan Rapinoe of the U.S. women's soccer team and Sue Bird, a WNBA player, were so radically opposed to. And then most recently, former Russian jailbird Brittany Griner. Let me bring in the one and only Representative Kat Cammack of Florida, who is my all-time favorite from the Florida 3rd District. You just finished up a farm tour, which we're going to get into and talking about these issues, but you did vote for the protection of women in sports. In the state of Florida, Representative, what is it that you're hearing from families? What are you hearing from moms? What are you hearing from these girls? And what is your argument to the people who tell you that trans kids just want to play?
Tony, good to see you. And I'm glad that I've been upgraded from your second favorite to your fave. So that's progress.
For now. We'll see how it goes today.
Stop. You love me. No, it's to me common sense. Think about this. We have fought for how many years, how many generations for women to have the opportunity to play, to partake in sports. Heck, I remember when I was in high school, I wanted to join the golf team. And they told me that I wasn't allowed to join the golf team because I was a girl. And so they had to start one because I had raised my hand and said, hey, I want to golf. And, back in the day, I was playing basketball, I was playing volleyball, I was playing softball, I was a multi-sport athlete. And even in the early 2000s, there still wasn't equal boys and girls sports. So the fact that we are now to this point where we've gone backwards, right? I call it clown world. It's now at a point in time where we've been yelled at for God knows how many years to follow the science. And all of a sudden we're saying, hey, biologically, these boys have completely different bone structures, muscular structures, hormones, all these things. And it is a one, unfair advantage, but two, it's dangerous. Look no further than what has happened in MMA. Look at what has happened in volleyball. There was recently a volleyball player who took a spike right to the face and was concussed as a result. And it was a trans player who was able to do that. I mean, it's just wholly unfair. It's not right. And while I don't have kids yet, if I have a daughter in the future, I want her playing against girls, not boys dressed as girls. And listen, I'm very libertarian in the sense that if that's what you want to do with your life, that is your call. No government, no one should be able to tell you otherwise. But when you start infringing on other people's rights, that's when we have to draw the line.
Should government be able to engage a whoa, you can't do that when we're talking about children? Because I'd be with you on adults being able to make that call, whether I understand it or not, is completely inconsequential. Children seems to be a different subject.
Yeah, no, if you want, as an adult, if you want to dress up or, whatever you want to do, that's your call. I think, that's the beauty of America. But for kids, that's the whole thing. If you're in school, and particularly if you're in public school, which is funded with taxpayer dollars, I think we have an obligation to uphold Title IX. And when you look at the university system, where Title IX has protected women's sports like basketball, golf, volleyball, you name it, it's been covered. And now we're having conversations about women now having to compete against men. It's wrong. It's just wrong. I mean, I think I go back to this. I feel like I'm living in clown world where all of a sudden we're the ones who are somehow doing something bad because we're protecting women's sports. It's crazy. I had this conversation with my mom. And I said, when I was growing up playing all these sports as a kid, did you ever think that I would be playing against boys? And she's like, well, at some point, it's no longer just fun, it's competitive. And when you're a competitive athlete, it can be dangerous. And so many of these women are learning firsthand what it means when you're having to compete against a man, and it's not ending well.
It also, part of this seems to be, it really does seem to blow up a feminist doctrine that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, the famous Gloria Steinem line. Like somehow it is this insulting thing to recognize that there are indeed physical differences between us. And if there are indeed physical differences between us, well, then there is such a thing as a woman, there is such a thing as a man, and biologically you can make that difference. So how much of this is being fought? Because if it's not fought, there is a lot of destruction to many, many years of what we were told was feminist thought.
Well, think about the fact that, not to go in a hard right direction here, but this NIL discussion that we're having right now in Congress, right? Name, image, and likeness, where collegiate athletes can be compensated for their name, image, and likeness as it's being used to promote sports. There is an effort, a real effort underway to, one, unionize student athletes, to make them employees of the college, which I think would be a disaster. And then also to do a revenue sharing model. The revenue sharing model would obliterate women's sports as we know it. Literally, the only two sports that would survive a revenue sharing model within collegiate athletics would be men's football and men's basketball. And so with this discussion that we're having in one room, I hear from those on the left screaming at the top of their lungs, we have to protect women's sports. We have to protect women's sports. And then I go down a few floors and I'm having a conversation with the leftists, and they're saying we need to allow transgender individuals to play in women's sports. And I'm thinking, am I taking crazy pills? Am I the crazy one here?
Well, the answer is
it's their agenda.
The answer is maybe you are the crazy one here, talking to Representative Kat Cammack of Florida, the Florida 3rd District. But this is part of where I was going. So much of this conversation seems to be, if we're going to define misogyny in any which way, this would be it. There is a real hatred for women that comes out of this movement. What I have not been able to square the circle on is, why does it come in so many places, certainly not every place, from other women?
Oh, I don't know. Again, I mean, it's like that example I was just telling you about. I'm talking to people in one room, and the conversations about NIL and how we have to protect women's sports, and then you go to the next room on the exact same day, and those exact same people come in here, and then they yell at you that you're not standing up for all women. Well, I can define a woman. Some people can't, and God bless them. In the South, we would say, bless your heart. But it's just, this is why I keep saying this is clown world. And ultimately, Tony, I think this is designed to distract us from what's really going on, right? We're fighting these culture wars, which sometimes I just feel are not silly, but it's like you have to ask yourself, how did we get here? And then you step back and you realize the entire destruction of the constitutional republic is at stake. Like the destruction is happening in front of us, and they're distracting us with shiny objects over here. Meanwhile, spending money, driving everything into the ground, making people dependent on big government. And it is, sometimes you have to wonder, like, is this by design? Like, are they punking us? You know, I guess as a millennial, I still, believe in the whole punking thing with
Oh, no. So do the rest of us, millennial or not. Talking to Representative Kat Cammack, you can find her at Cammack, Cammack, Cammack.house.gov. From your website, from one of your press releases, Congresswoman Kat Cammack hosts bipartisan farm bill listening session in Florida's 3rd with the House Agriculture Committee. People forget the level of farming that takes place in Florida, specifically in that dairy world. Most people think of just citrus. But you did a tour. You've been doing this for the past month, because we've been trying to get together for the past 30 days to discuss this.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what the listening tour is. What are you hearing from farmers? Is it industry specific on the farming or on the ranching? And is it about our economic state? Is it about a competition issue? What presents issue to our farmers today?
So, like you said, and Tony, you hit it right on the head there. Nobody really thinks of Florida as a massive ag state. They think of Florida and they think beaches, palm trees, Disney, and oranges, maybe, sometimes. So when you think about Florida agriculture, we have over 300 specialty crops. We're top 3 in cow-calf production in the country. Number 1 in citrus crops, number 1 in snap peas, watermelons. We do an insane amount of peanuts, dairy, as you mentioned. We're number 1 in 10 different aquaculture categories. We are a massive, massive ag state. We actually feed over 150 million Americans annually. So when we talk about agriculture, we're talking not just about the livelihood of our state. It's the number 2 economic driver right behind tourism. And some years when tourism is down, it's number 1. We're talking about national security. We're talking about the fact that a nation that cannot feed itself is not secure. And we're in a moment in time where people are starting to say, hey, maybe we should import our food. That to me is terrifying. So number 1 thing I'm hearing from all of our producers across the state, and Tony, you know this, Florida's like 4 states put together, right? It's like South Florida is really like North Cuba, and then, the panhandle's like South Alabama, Floribama, as people call it. In my neck of the woods, it could technically be like South Georgia, but don't tell Buddy Carter that. He'll lose his mind. We have a hodgepodge in Florida, but it's everything that you would hear in other parts of the country. It's the labor issues. It's the lack of mechanization. It's the regulatory environment, which is absolutely killing our producers. Things like WOTUS. It's the high diesel prices. It's the cost of inputs like fertilizers. The fact that you have China, which has suspended nitrogen exports, and Belarus and Russia, which are the world's leader when it comes to potash and phosphate. These are all things that drive up the cost of our food in the grocery store.
Right. And then the potash and the phosphate is a fertilizer conversation. And WOTUS is Waters of the United States, which is about how these farmers get to control how they're going to actually handle the land. And this is about the federal government trying to get in the way of how you water your own crops or how you take care of your own livestock with water that's on your own property. And this is there's this continued fight. Is there something that you're hearing from the farmers, specifically Representative Cammack, that they're saying to you, if we don't change X, the result's going to be catastrophic?
In Florida, I think there's one thing that is separate from the rest of the country. In Florida, we have been pretty damaged by trade deals. So there's a thing called a seasonal or perishable provision. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds. That's my pun of the day. So, Tony, I hope you're smiling. But one of one of the things that our farmers and ranchers here in the Sunshine State are absolutely desperate for is a seasonal or perishable provision, which would allow us to sell our crops here domestically. I'll use blueberries as an example. Florida produces 40% of all of America's blueberries. They're in season right now. They're harvesting. And what's happening is Mexico, which has taken the exact same varieties that have been developed using taxpayer dollars, they have been stolen, and they grow that same variety in Mexico, basically paying slave labor wages, not abiding by the same regulatory regime that we have to. And then they export that crop, that harvest, and they dump it on Florida's market, bottoming out our prices. So our farmers cannot sell their produce for the same price that the Mexican farmers can, because it's totally inequitable. And so because of NAFTA and subsequently USMCA, there was no protection that was there. So everyone talks about free trade, but free trade should also be fair. And when people are harvesting in America for $23 an hour and they're paying $23 a day in Mexico, where do you think that's going to come from? And
Right.
So all the environmentalists who say, oh, we need to, get rid of all the farms and ranches and all that, and that they're bad for the environment, that is such horse crap. You and I both know that. I cleaned that up for you, just for you.
Thank you.
So you didn't have to bleep me out, but think about this.
We're gonna think about this in 1 second. Stay right there, Representative Kat Cammack. We're gonna get much more into this subject. Keep it here. I'm Tony Katz. Now, the reason I did that, Representative, is because I'm doing two things: live on radio and live on the live stream. So I had to have the radio go to commercial, but while we're still on the stream, finish up in just a couple of minutes what you mean by the think about that in terms of what's happening as you discuss it with the Mexico blueberries and as you followed forward.
No, so think about this. The people who are saying that our farmers and ranchers are bad for the environment, they're also saying that it's okay for Mexico to use chemicals that have been outlawed for 50 plus years here in the United States. They're also saying that they're okay with the food miles and the carbon emissions that it takes to truck all of that food up into the United States. But when it's done here, it's a problem for them. So the hypocrisy of the left knows no bounds. So our job is to level the playing field. I want free trade, but I want fair trade. And this issue of seasonal and perishable has the potential, if we don't get it fixed in this year's farm bill, it will destroy agriculture and the family farm here in Florida forever. We are down to about 21 tomato farmers in the entire state of Florida, down from over 200 just 10 years ago.
That's real numbers. Representative, up against it, Representative Kat Cammack from the Florida 3rd. I appreciate taking the time to be with us. And guys, I appreciate you being with us as well. And my thanks to Americans for Prosperity that sponsor what it is that I do, economic liberty, free speech. So much appreciate you guys. And we'll catch you next time. Take care.